This week's podcast is sponsored by the Bowers & Wilkins 600 Series 3. The 8th generation of one of Hi-Fi's most acclaimed ranges features some of the most comprehensive upgrades the 600 series has ever received. The Bowers & Wilkins 600 Series 3 is designed for every music lover. It's the attainable way to experience the joys of true sound at home. Discover more at bowerswilkins.com.
Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday the 13th of November. And a little bit of a confession up front. This is a pre-recorded podcast. We are busy on the Monday, unfortunately. Some of us are away doing Secret Squirrel stuff and we're not around. So it is recorded, but don't worry. It is going out at the usual time on YouTube. So if you are watching us now on the premiere, then a very good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us. You can still ask your questions and producer Andy will round them up and we'll answer them in the next podcast. So tonight I'm joined by regulars, Martin Dew, Ed Selley and Ian Collen. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello, sir.
Oh.
And right, so what are we doing this week? Well, this week I'm going to be reviewing two Panasonic TVs. They use two slightly different display technologies. So I'll be looking at the MZ1500 OLED and the company's first mini LED TV, the MX950. Both of those reviews are on AV Forums, full in-depth reviews, and there will also be video reviews popping up on our YouTube channel as well. But we will discuss some very briefly tonight and go through some of the pros and cons with them. Martin's going to be taking a look at an integrated amplifier from Parasound, a name that goes back many decades in home cinema and hi-fi. So we'll be covering that, as well as Ed looking at latest hi-fi news. And you'll also be taking a look at the Audiolab 9000N streamer, which has plenty of comments on the thread. It's generated quite a bit of discussion. We'll be discussing it a little bit more tonight in the podcast. And of course, we'll also be answering your feedback and answering some of your questions. Not in the chat live tonight, but like I said, producer Andy will be rounding them up. He has been doing that on a regular basis, looking through the threads, looking through the discussion on YouTube and collating all of those questions. And we endeavour to answer them. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next segment of the podcast right now. So yeah, if you want questions answered, then look for this podcast in the podcast forums on AV Forums. So if you've got the forum list, look all the way down to the bottom and you'll find the podcast forum down there. Find this episode and then just leave your question in there and we'll get back to you. We'll either answer it in the thread or for everybody's benefit, we'll come back in the next podcast and answer them for you. If that's no good for you, you can also email podcast@avforums.com. Send your emails in. We will pick them up. We will get the questions answered. And of course, in this area, down the bottom, if you're watching on YouTube, you're watching the video, you can leave your comments, feedback and questions there. And again, we'll collate those and we will answer them. So the first question was actually from myself, from Silverback 007. He asks, Phil, what TV would you want for Christmas? I've got a feeling that this is a loaded question. You're looking at me to say, what is the best TV of 2023 and would I buy it and so on. So if I'm open to buying any TV or having any TV for Christmas, I think what I'd go for is a micro LED, 200-inch, maybe. These things that cost 200,000 pounds at the minute. Yeah, go for one of them. And that way, I'm not giving you the answer to what I think is the best TV of 2023 just yet. You'll have to wait for that one. And that question was asked on YouTube. There is another question from Bubble Trap Me or Bubble Wrap. No, Bubble Wrapped Me states Philips OLED plus 908 TV. How Philips dare to launch a TV in the UK at that price without proper Freeview app support is beyond me. If you're going to point that one, you have to point it at most Google TV TVs this year. The vast majority do not. At this moment in time, have Freeview Play or any of the UK catch-up services, apart from maybe Channel 5 app appears on some of them. Those are rights issues. Those are being worked out. I have asked Philips directly because I've got the 908 in for review at the minute. They see that as a 2024 update. It is coming. It's just you got two separate parties having to negotiate. So those will be coming. And it's not just Philips. Sony was the same. So the A95L didn't have any of the UK catch-up services available out of the box as things stand on Google TV. And it is the case for quite a few Google TVs, so the apps will appear. It just comes down to licensing and other bits and pieces. And it looks like this is quite TV heavy, so I hope the other guys don't mind. I'll try and race through these as quickly as possible. So we're moving on to streaming and the streaming debate. And EV Forums member Toon Army says he uses filmmaker mode all the time and he's never experienced any dimming issues with the G3. He's been surprised with the level of brightness and had to check a picnic settings. I wish it did have a picnic setting. Picture settings. He has to check them. Yes, it is a very bright TV. It's great for bright rooms. OLED really has come on this year with MLED technology, micro lens array. It really does boost the brightness. You can watch these TVs now in a bright room and not really worry about it, whereas LCD TVs were always the thing. So one key aspect for him is the quality speed of the broadband connection when it comes to streaming, and that is the case. There's lots of questions and answers about this in terms of motion, in terms of streaming quality, so on. At the end of the day, it'll come down to your broadband and how good that is. Then what the service is using. If you're in the UK using some of these services, they do use lower bit rates. You may be better off using a VPN and visiting the US version of said apps to get better streaming quality and so on. So yeah, there's a few things to get through here. Faster frame rates. So David D6637 says he prefers 24 frames per second for film, but he does agree with Jules when it comes to frame rate for future HDR sports and so on, higher frame rate. I've seen this. I've seen demonstrations of it. It's been around for a little while now. It's not commercially available just yet, but yeah, it makes a big difference for sports. And it's something that we've never actually stopped any of you guys doing out there with your TVs. 24 frames per second, switch interpolation off. If it's sports, it's video based, it's captured by video cameras, not film cameras. Yeah, add interpolation in if you feel that that's what it needs. Smooth it out if you feel that, you know, your sports content, that's what it needs. Anybody else had demonstrations of higher frame rate sports? Martin, have you seen it yet?
You're still muted, mate.
You're on mute. Never mind.
No, I had a couple of demos at CES. Admittedly, it was American sport, so it was long periods of standing around in high frame rate, followed by brief bursts of moving around in high frame rate. I do get it. It's hard to get past the slightly hyper-real sort of thing, because it doesn't look like that when you're sat in the stadium. You know, it still doesn't look. It's still not 100% realistic, but you know, I can see the virtue. And by the time things are really going like the clappers, so you know, motorsport and certain other very high intensity things, it does allow you to get details that you're otherwise missing. I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing where it looks less uncanny. It's going to take some time to get your head around, and it's naturally going to come down to how well people do it. So, I've got an open mind.
Yeah, I mean, our eyes don't work at 120 frames per second or 144 frames a second. You know, you just do that in front of your eyes, and you can't see any detail or whatever. There is a natural blur to movement, and your eye doesn't see what you think it sees either. You know, your eye's constantly scanning, and your brain's actually making up a lot of what it is that you see based on its experience. So your eyes don't work like a camera, and yeah, higher frame rate makes things look nice and sharp, but it does have that super real, super smooth look to it, because our eyes don't work that way. There is a natural image blur to everything that we see, and motion blur to what we see, and that's the beauty of film. Sometimes, you know, it's a lower frame rate, 24 frames per second. It's why it was chosen. It looks natural. It has that aesthetic to it that higher frame rates, even at going up to 48 frames per second, it looks odd, especially for, I think it's a generational thing, certainly for those of us who grew up on film projection and 24 frames per second and slow frame rates for TV and so on. We're kind of used to seeing that, and I think generations coming up now with games consoles and other viewing displays and that kind of thing, smartphones, displays at 120 hertz, and TVs with frame interpolation switched on out of the box and so on. I think people have gotten used to that look as well, and I think there's definitely two different camps there. But anyway,
I think it does cheapen the look, though.
It does, yeah.
Film, particularly of movies, and There's something a little bit magical about 24 frames per second, the one that got settled on. And obviously, there were reasons for that, how many frames you could get going through a camera. But what they settled on seems to work very well. And it gives film a slightly dreamy, slightly surreal, slightly removed feel, which suits very well, suits the medium.
Yeah, it does. And like I say, people who have grown up like us, Martin, we've always been to the cinema. We remember the flicker from the projectors back in the day, and so on. And like I say, it gives it a certain look. But yeah, for sports and for video captured programming, I think interpolation does work to a certain degree, and we would never stop people doing that. But for film, try and see it at 24 frames per second. It's done that way for a reason, and like Martin says, it does have that aesthetic to it, that look to it. Moving on quickly, 666JGN Knots or GG Knots asks, wants to pick my brains about the LG C2 and watching TNT Sports UHD via Virgin. He says it now looks far too saturated, whereas when it was BT Sports UHD, without HDR, it didn't look as saturated. What's the issue there? I don't know. Is my honest answer. I don't have a C2 and I don't have TNT Sports UHD to look at that. Why it's oversaturated, I can't tell you that. There's a couple of things that you could check. You could check what the metadata is, if the Skybox or whatever it is that you're watching on is sending any metadata to the TV. What is it sending? Is it HLG? And maybe anybody that has that setup or a very similar setup, maybe you can chip in the comments section. Have you witnessed this? Is it an issue? The only thing I was going to suggest is that maybe look at color space settings in your TV and just check that that is set the way it should be set, which on the C2, if left in auto, it should be okay. But if the signal's sending the wrong metadata, it could be that it's triggering the wrong color space. So just check that and see if that is potentially an issue. If not, then I'm not really sure what the issue would be there, and we need some more information from other people, and then we could maybe approach TNT Sports and ask them what is actually happening with their UHD signal. I've got a feeling if it's coming via Virgin, it should be HLG, and although I don't want to say that because I don't know. We need a little bit more information. Hopefully, if we get that information, we can answer that question a little bit more for you, and if we can reach out to TNT and maybe get some technical information on that, we will try and do that as well. Just a couple of other comments again on about bandwidth and so on. Completely agree with all those comments. We need to see an uptick in bandwidth. People, the internet connections are getting better certainly in the UK. I can't speak for the US or other areas. Some places in the US are fantastic. Some other places I've visited have very slow internet. I guess it's wherever you are and what the infrastructure is. In the UK, it is getting better. We're getting more fiber to box anyway, and certainly more fiber to the home as well. So we should see things improve from that aspect. It's then whether these streaming services then up their game, and you would like to think that they would do that in terms of Netflix and Prime. And I know Bravia Core, that whole service is high bit rate, but it's very restricted to Sony owners. So hopefully that'll resolve itself and get a little bit better as we go on. Very quickly, Sony A95L review. So again, comments coming in on this, mainly about how expensive it is. Yes, it is an expensive TV. I've pointed this out a number of times in my review. These TVs, the flagship TVs at the minute, so the Philips 908, the LG G3, the Samsung S95C, they all have their pros and cons. Where the Sony has the major con is that it's about £1,000 more than all the others, and when it comes to performance, you ain't getting that, and you're not even getting anything that's different from the other TVs as well in terms of build quality or design or whatever. So it is kind of difficult to justify the cost at the minute. If you are looking at budget, there'll be some people where that's just not a consideration. They don't care about the price, they just want the best. But for those who do look at value, because the Sony's come out so late in the year, that is a reason why it's still top heavy when it comes to pricing, and that should settle itself a little bit when we get a little bit further down the line, probably into the next year. I wouldn't expect any discount for Black Friday when it comes to the A95L. So hopefully that answers the questions from Gonza Deak and Sonola 777. So hopefully that answers your questions. Right. And just to wrap up on the Q&A bit, I'm conscious we spent a little bit of time on this, but we will move swiftly. The podcast format. Now, I did say that we are looking at changing the format going into the new year, 2024. And the idea is that we're going to separate the podcasts out and spend a little bit more time on each of the main categories. So going forward, we're looking at introducing a TV podcast that would go out on a Monday night. There's going to be a separate hi-fi podcast and then a separate home cinema audio podcast that discusses the whole home cinema side of things, projectors, sound systems, AVRs, that kind of thing. TV that will focus on TV, hi-fi that Ed can deep dive into some of the burning issues around hi-fi. And we want to make it interesting for you listeners. We want to educate. We want to tell you about some of the things that we are looking at, some of the new technology that's coming along and our opinions on that, but also giving you tips and tricks and pushing you in the right direction in terms of what is the correct speaker position, for example, for a Dolby Atmos sound system and what's recommended, what actually works in the real world. We'll look at getting more guests in from the industry as well. And because we're going to separate these out, and we know there's going to be 12 episodes of each for the year, we're going to have some kind of storyline that goes through them, or in the example of hi-fi, Ed might actually look at building a hi-fi system through the year and giving you ideas on components to add into a system for a certain budgets and so on, and what you actually need in 2024 in terms of a hi-fi system. Is it multiple boxes, or is it just a couple of boxes these days? There's all these kinds of subjects that we can get into. So that's our thinking for next year. The other thing is that we're going to move the podcast over to the AV Forums podcast channel. So that is a separate channel that does exist. Go bookmark it and subscribe now, AV Forums podcast. All the podcasts are going to move over there. You'll find all our short podcasts over there at the moment. So little sections of the podcast that we are interested in, they get made into smaller videos. So you can go and have a look at the bite-sized versions of those. So that's the plan. So what do you guys think? Is that something that interests you, being a little bit more focused on each subject, maybe deep diving into certain TV models in a little bit more detail, actually getting this stuff in for review and then going into a little bit more detail within the podcast that we don't maybe cover in our written reviews or video reviews and so on. So give us your ideas and what you think on that going forward. And we've had some decent feedback from Toon Army, from Stevie DR and Tech to Nut. They've all given us some really positive feedback on that and touching on all the things that we're actually looking at introducing next year. So give us our thoughts, or your thoughts. We know what we're thinking. What are you thinking? Tell us all about it, and we'll look at it and we'll come back and you can shape what we do next year in terms of the podcast, in terms of the subjects, in terms of what we're actually doing with that. So I have spoken for about 17 minutes now. So apologies for that. There was a lot to get through and it was all TV heavy. So moving on very swiftly before we get into current competitions, Ed is growing a moustache, and there's a very good reason for that. I've done this in the past. Good on you. Movember, tell us a little bit about what you're doing. And I believe your other half's getting involved. She's not growing a moustache after doing that.
No, this is very important to stress that she's not. Movember was originally aimed pretty much exclusively at male-specific cancers. Over the years, it's sort of had a bit of mission creep, but it's become heavily focused as well on men's mental health, which is, well, all mental health is somewhat under discussed and slightly fraught. So or anything that assists with that, as far as I'm concerned, is a good thing. So I am busy endeavouring to grow a mustache. At the same time, yes, my partner is running 60k over the course of the month. I mean, the chances are that she'll probably do rather better than that in the end of these things. But the page for my donation set will go into the comments, and I can stick things there. There will be unpleasant photo updates of how things are getting on. This is day 9. It's not gone quite as badly as I thought it might, but I mean, I still look like the sort of man who's been, buying alcohol for minors. So it's not a good look, but it's for a good cause.
You posted a photo the other day with your sunglasses on, and the first thing that popped in my head was the video for Sabotage. They used to
Well, it was a slight dirty. You know, if I was if in the UK, I'd have a slightly tatty Vauxhall Senator. But yes, that's what's going on. That's why I look more dishevelled than usual. So yes, we'll pop the comments thing in there. And to anyone else that's doing it, I hope that you make it through the itchy phase, because I haven't yet, and it's bloody horrible. So yeah, that's what's going on there.
I had to grow a beard for a movie, Ed, and I have to. Everybody said there's a time when the itching goes away. This was specifically for Lincoln, and I'm sorry to tell you that the itching phase never went away.
Well, for some people it doesn't. So I'm resigned to being one of those people. We'll see how it goes, and we'll take it from there. But yes, that is that's what's going on at this point. We've just lost Phil.
No, I'm still here, but my
he's having camera issues. But yes.
Issues.
So hang on a second. I'll bring up the. I mean, obviously, just because we're not live doesn't mean we can't be any less slick than we normally are. So moving swiftly on, we've got current competition. So whilst Phil has a quick fight with his viewing system, Ian, what can we win?
Lots is the short answer, but we'll start with the big stuff. Open to all AV Forums members. There's a chance to win a Wharfdale DX3 home cinema pack, which is quite accurately described as a stylish and compact home cinema speaker set based on the company's Diamond 12 series. It's made up of 4 satellite speakers covering the fronts and rears. There's also a center speaker and a powered subwoofer thrown in. Total is worth a prize worth around £500, and that comes courtesy of Peter Tyson and IAG. People might want to be interested to know that competition closes at midnight or just before midnight on the Wednesday, the 29th of November. So you've got a little bit of time to get your name in the hat, but don't delay. And as an added bonus, most of these competitions are usually open to our UK residents, but we do have a competition open for US members currently if they want to get in on the competition action, with an exclusive chance to win a $500 voucher to spend at MPB, which most people should know by now is a platform for buying, selling and trading used photo and video gear. So that's one for our US members, and that competition is open till just before midnight on Tuesday, the 12th of December. So if you fancy winning $500 worth of, well, hopefully quality photo and video gear, then again, that's a good one to get your name in the hat for. As usual, we've got a bunch of disc competitions, which are also open to all AV Forums members. Just to speed through them quite quickly, there's Right Here, Right Now, the Fatboy Slim documentary on Blu-ray, Visible Secret, 2001 horror comedy from Radiance Films, also on Blu-ray, Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai, excellent film starring Forrest Whitaker on Blu-ray, Barbie, I haven't seen yet, but it seems like a whole lot of fun. That's also available on Blu-ray. On DVD, you can win Mrs. Siddhu Investigates, 4-part Acon TV crime drama. You can also win Creation Stories on Blu-ray, which is by a pick of Alan McGee, apparently, who, if you didn't know, was the man responsible for supplying the Britpop soundtrack to the 1990s, apparently. And we also have a bunch of exclusive offers for patrons, which includes the Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, Justice League, Superheroes and Huntsman Part 2, Delicatessen, The Witch and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Japanese thrillers Door and Door 2. There's a Warner Brothers Studio collection box set, Mortal Kombat Legends, Cage Match, Little Bone Lodge, Chopper, which is an excellent film, excellent Australian film with Eric Bana. That's also in there on Blu-ray. Ginger Snaps Trilogy, Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire Season 1 on Blu-ray, King and Country, and The Wandering Earth 2, also on Blu-ray. All of those, get all the details, see what you want. Everything's up on avforums.com/competitions. As mentioned, all competitions are eligible to AV Forums members or patrons resident in the UK, but of course there is also that US exclusive one, so our US friends and neighbours can get in on the act as well this time around.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. That is the competitions. And then moving on to new supporters, we do have some new sign-ups. So why don't you tell us about that, Ed?
Sure, just wait for this to reload again. We have got people who have bought us a coffee is Titch77 and Shelby. I was about to say Shelby, like your car, but it's not. It's Shelby. So thank you very much to you both. As I say, we've outlined what we might be doing with podcasts in the future. I hope you're on board with that, and we'll see how it goes in 2024.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we're all caught up. It's time now to get on with the show. Right, so we go from a really short ident to a really short presenter. I'm going to be quick with this because we've got 2 TVs to get through on this episode of the podcast. The reviews are up on the website now, so if you want to get in depth, you can do that. First of all, I'm going to look at Panasonic OLED. It's the MZ1500. And the big story with this TV is basically that it's not the TV that it used to be. So the 1500 model used to have the flagship panel that the 2000 model would have. And the 2000 model would also have a fully featured Dolby Atmos sound system. So it would have upward firing speakers built into the top of the TV, and then a 3-channel sound bar built into the bottom of the TV, and also 2 side speakers that were about 3/4 of the way up each side of the TV that gave you fire off to the side to give you like a surround effect. So it had a fully featured sound system and the top panel. That was the 2000 model. The 1500 model had the same panel, but none of the speakers. It had 2 downward firing 15-watt speakers if you needed some sound, but it was designed for the enthusiast. So the person who wanted the best possible Panasonic picture quality with the latest panel, but without the big sound system. So they're not paying for something that they were not going to use. They were going to add it to their sound system. That's no longer the case. So the MZ1500 no longer has the top end panel. It has last year's top end panel. So it doesn't have micro lens array that the 2000 model has this year, and it doesn't have the meta brightness booster that the top panel has. So it has last year's TV. It does have the heatsink, and it's still a relatively bright OLED TV, and it has the HCX Pro AI processing and everything else that's in the top end set when it comes to the processing and features. It just has a slightly reduced panel in terms of performance compared to the top model. And Panasonic's reasoning for this is that they want to add different stages, different points to their range, because their argument last year was that the 1500 kind of got lost in the range. It only really made sense to enthusiasts who didn't want the sound system, but wanted to have the top panel. So they now think that they are giving people more choice by having different performance levels, different price points in their OLED lineup, and that's their reasoning for that. When pushed a little bit further, they wouldn't go out of the way to specifically say it came down to sales, but reading between the lines, it came down to sales. They were not selling enough. That model was lost in the range and didn't appeal to the widest possible market. So if you look directly on to the MZ1500 compared to the 2000, they look the same from the front. They have the same layout in terms of soundbar at the bottom and so on, but it is a different soundbar, it's different drivers and so on that's on that TV. So if you're an enthusiast, it's quite a disappointment that Panasonic's no longer producing a TV that would suit somebody with a full sound system. If you want the best panel from Panasonic this year, you're going to have to pay for a Dolby Atmos sound system that you don't particularly need or want. So some people are going to have issues with that. Other people who are maybe just looking for a one-box solution, you now have a choice throughout the range. The 980, which is the MZ980, is the kind of the entry level in terms of the premium processing chip level. So you've got the 980. You then step up. It doesn't have the heatsink. You then step up to the 1500, which has the panel with the heatsink. And then the next step up is the 2000 with the full Atmos sound system and the MLA panel on there, the latest panel. So that's your choices with the Panasonic. In terms of performance, can't really fault it. It's a mid-range, second-tier TV in the Panasonic range, and that's how I would describe the performance. It's kind of like a little bit better than an LG C3. It's round about the OLED 808 from Philips and the Samsung C90C, round about that kind of level of the market. Performance-wise, couldn't really fault it. 1000 nit peak brightness, excellent tone mapping, great color, everything you expect from Panasonic. It has that Panasonic image that you've come to expect. A couple of little issues. Posterization around bright objects seems to be an issue for the Panasonics. It was last year. It's continued again into this year. So you get a little bit of posterization around bright objects and so on. But it's a solid OLED TV. Is it worth 2,200 quid for the 55? Again, it's going to come down to you, your budget, your use case. The thing is, you've got so much choice this year when it comes to TVs and quality TVs. Basically, what I would say to you is, what is your use case? What are you going to be using the TV for? and there will be one that fits what you're looking for. You don't have to go and buy a top of the line TV to get everything that you need these days. If there's things that you don't need, like sound system, you can normally find a different model from some other manufacturers. So yeah, 1500 solid TV. The review's up if you want to get into more detail on that one, and the video review is also up on our YouTube channel, so go and have a look at the video review for that. And then moving on to another interesting TV from Panasonic. They've gone back to making LCD TVs and premium LCD TVs. This one's a mini LED, and the first thing that's going to pop into people's heads, if you remember back to 2016, the launch of the DX902. Fantastic TV built from the ground up by Panasonic in terms of the LCD tech. Fantastic full array local dimming backlight. Very, very clever processing. It looked the dogs when it came out in 2016. This TV doesn't replace that. Doesn't get close to that performance, because at the end of the day, manufacturers are not, apart from Samsung, are not spending money on development of LCD tech or mini LED tech. It is a Panasonic mini LED TV. It's got 128 separate zones. There's thousands of LEDs in each zone, but it's 128 separate zones. The processing is really good. There's blooming suppression in there. The image is what you would expect from that level of the market. So it's a £1,500 TV. It's what you would expect in terms of Panasonic picture quality. It's accurate. It looks good. Blacks are not as deep or as fluid as an OLED, because it's not an OLED. Black bars on scope films do look a little bit lighter in terms of blacks, not fully black. But this is designed to be watched with the lights on, and with the lights on, you don't notice that. You don't notice any of the drawbacks of LCD technology. And let's face it, the drawbacks of LCD technology are well known. They've been around for decades, and nobody solved them up until this point, and not likely to solve them. So as long as you're happy with the drawbacks that an LCD TV has in terms of image quality, watching in the dark, and so on, if none of that bothers you, this is a cracking TV. It's good for gaming as well, so really decent in terms of gaming. 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs, 40 gigabit per second inputs. Has the new game bar feature, it has VRR and so on. You can, input lag is very good as well, 60 milliseconds and 5.9 milliseconds, 60 and 120 hertz. We'll do 4K 120, Dolby Vision at 60. So yeah, it's a solid TV. If you know what the restrictions normally are in terms of the tech, and none of that bothers you, at least you're not going to have any issues with image retention. If you are a gamer and that kind of thing, it maybe appeals to you a little bit more. It's a solid living room workhorse, a solid TV that it's certainly worth the money, and it's well built. It's and again, to call Panasonic a TV manufacturer is probably the wrong thing these days, because not a lot of TV manufacturers actually manufacture TVs now. They buy the parts in and assemble the TVs. So yeah, it's an assembled TV. It's got TCL panel in there. Obviously, Panasonic's processing on top of that. There's a MediaTek chip in there as well. Not the latest Pantonic chips, but last generation MediaTek. So it's a solid TV. And if that's what you're looking for, and you like Panasonic in terms of its branding, in terms of its image quality, it is really accurate. It looks great. Then yeah, it's a solid choice. Go read my review on AV Forums. You get a little bit more in depth. You can have a look at the graphs and all the detailed results if you want them. And there'll be a video review probably on Tuesday, so the day after this podcast goes out live. The video review will also be up for that TV. So before I finish on the TV side of things, any questions, guys, on those Panasonics? Or
sorry, has Panasonic intimated that? I mean, is this? I mean, they've gone to the effort of producing an LED television. Are they going to make more than one of these things, or is it just a sort of water test?
I think this is a bit of a test. I think they can get the components. They feel they can. Going back to 2016, that's when Panasonic were still building a lot of the stuff. They were still a panel manufacturer and so on. And I think this is the first attempt where it's not their own stuff. They're actually buying the parts in and assembling the TV and adding the processing and everything else on top. So this is their first example of a TV at this level. And it's an impressive TV. Does it stand out from the competition? No, not particularly. Are there cheaper TVs out there that perform just as well? Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to stand out from the competition when you're making use of much the same components, realistically.
Exactly. And again, you've got the same with the OLED market. vast majority are using LG display panels. It's what they do with engineering and the processing and everything else on top of that, and how they add their differences in. And it's the same with LCD TVs. There's only, I think, 3 manufacturers still in terms of panel manufacture. So, you know, you're kind of limited on those choices. It's the engineering that you can then add on to that panel. To say it was a TCL TV, which I've seen a few people say in the comments, is pretty unfair. That's not the case. They're buying the panel in, but they're doing their thing with the panel. The same as OLEDs, you know, people buying in LG or Samsung display panels, but then doing their own engineering on top of that. So, yeah,
Phil, they had always, sorry, Phil, they'd always considered themselves as kind of market leaders in terms of tech and image quality and everything else. I know the Japanese manufacturers don't kind of hold that, you know, esteem anymore, but that certainly used to be the case, didn't it?
It did, and they are trying to hang on to that. So I would still say that Panasonic genuinely push towards excellent picture quality, and you are guaranteed a certain level of picture quality from Panasonic, whether it's an LED, LCD, or an OLED. They have their philosophy when it comes to image, which is the creator's intent. They work a lot with Hollywood and so on, and a lot of colorists, you know, sign off on their TVs as well, and they are used professionally, and they have professional menus on there for professional use. So they're very much trying to keep that aspect of their business when it comes to TV. And of course, the professional side as well, Martin. They still make grading monitors. They still produce cameras that are used in motion picture, and so on. So they still have that input. The same as Sony. I mean, Sony, they buy in their panels for their TVs from other manufacturers, but they still make grading monitors that are used in probably 50% of the facilities on the planet. Their cameras are used in all sorts of production, from TV drama all the way through to feature film. You know, Cine Alta cameras are world famous for a certain look, almost up there with ARRI in terms of you know, cameras that are actually used in making the content. So both of those companies might not be manufacturing anymore, but and more, you know, assembling these TVs, but there's still a lot of engineering in there. Still a lot of know-how when it comes to picture quality, and certainly picture processing is where everybody's having the battle at the minute. How do you make your TV the absolute cream of the crop? And it's interesting to see how manufacturers are doing that. You got Panasonic really going for accuracy. You got Sony, who are pushing that message as well, because they own a studio. They make all the kit that makes these feature films. So you should go and buy one of their TVs, because the TV is going to give you that experience at home as well. So those two manufacturers, Japanese manufacturers, staying with that message. But then you look at somebody like Philips and what Danny Tak does with their processing. So they try and make things, they like the accuracy, but they want to take it a little bit further in terms of brightness, in terms of pushing a little bit more color, but not excessively so, with their crystal clear and their processor. So it's interesting to see how each manufacturer is now looking at TVs and how do they create their own little niche. Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting to see how it's going. And my prediction is that TCL and Hisense, they're the next LG and Samsung. If you look at where LG and Samsung were 10, 15 years ago, and where they are now, and then you look at TCL and Hisense at the minute, so two Chinese brands who are, they've done the disruption side of things in terms of pricing. They're now setting the goal on quality, and this is where you're going to see some interesting developments over the next few years. Both of those companies have huge budgets as well, so they are obviously investing in R&D and pushing, you know, the next level of TV forward. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. So yeah, went off on a tangent there, but a good one. Thanks for your question, Martin. Excellent. Yeah. Right. So I think that kind of wraps up TV. Just before we go on to hi-fi, just what's coming up from me. So I am working on a TCL C745. Probably going to be bargain TV of the year. Stay tuned for the review. It's coming very soon, but I've been really impressed with this TV. 650 quid. You get a lot for your money in those terms. And like I've hinted at, I've been looking at the Philips OLED Plus 908, their flagship of the year, MLA panel, with their processing, and of course Ambilight on top of that. And the reason that this podcast is being pre-recorded is that when this podcast actually goes out, I'll be spending the day at Abbey Road, Studio 2, So which is in the limelight again because the Beatles had launched another single, the last ever single. But the vast majority of their material was done in Studio 2 at Abbey Road. So I'll be there when this podcast goes out, looking at the Philips 908 and also Bowers and Wilkins sound system on that TV. There'll be a video that comes out with that as well. So Josie's joining me on that day as well. We're going to really push the TV, calibrate it to an inch of its life, and test it in the surroundings of Abbey Road. So stay tuned for that video. But that's everything coming up TV wise. So we're going to hand over to Ed next for Hi-Fi.
If you enjoy the podcast on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, then please leave us a rating on your podcast app. We invite you to email questions and feedback to podcast@avforums.com and join in with this episode's discussion thread in the podcasts forum at AV Forums.
Right then, thanks Phil. Hi-Fi, we've got reviews from Martin and myself coming up, but first we have some news stories, and first up, and I think by far and away the most important of the stories that we've curated for this week, are new products from Marantz.
Yes indeed, there are two of them. The CD50N network player and the Model 50 integrated amplifier. As the name suggests, the CD50N not only capable of playing your compact discs, but it also comes with all of the access to all of the digital content that you can imagine. It comes with Ethernet, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi connections. It's a 32-bit Saber DAC in there. It's got a HEOS built in and a bunch of other stuff. So both physical and digital media looks like a very interesting option. And along with that, there's also the Model 50 integrated amplifier, which offers up to 70 watts per channel of Class AB amplification. Both of those new arrivals are priced at £1,600 in the UK and are available now.
Yes, we will hopefully be looking at those. This not least because I think the CD concept is an excellent one. This playing of optical discs, that might catch on, and being able to do network at the same time. Some of you remember we actually looked at the Model 30 versions of this. I'm intrigued at how different the 50s are. They're obviously less expensive, which means that certain things can't be done in the same way. But nevertheless, I think it's good looking audio, and I think it's Marantz leaning into their differences and doing things in a slightly different way to sister brand Denon and indeed to everyone else. So we will be looking at those as and when we can. Now, if you want something that looks completely different, you need to have a look at Ruark, don't you, Ian?
Yeah, they've announced the R810 and what they call the high fidelity radiogram. It's basically an all-in-one music system, which, it's got quite an interesting sort of retro design. It comes with a stand, a big frame stand, so it basically becomes as much a piece of furniture as it is a host for streaming all of your favorite music services and radio stations and so on. The unit itself comes with a couple of built-in tweeters, two mid-bass units, 200mm long-throw subwoofer, and a very intriguing package, all of which is due to launch some point in December with a £3,000 price tag. So do we like the look of it, I guess?
You see, this is interesting. I was speaking, I won't name them, someone who did the public relations for Ruark for some years. This isn't the first time they've made one this big. So they actually had another one that was, a very big lad some years ago. And it was the very definition of a Marmite product. They didn't exactly fly off the shelves, but the people that bought them didn't want anything else and are tremendously attached to them. I mean, this product exists in part because of the fanatical loyalty of those people. It's worth pointing out that in the time since the first time they've done this, Ruark's really kicked on in terms of supported streaming services, ability to, Bluetooth to it, AirPlay to it. They've put a lot of additional functionality into all of their all-in-ones and tidied up the aesthetic at the same time. I'm not promising to review this one, not least because I don't think I could fit it in anywhere to review. So it's going to need, if you're desperate for me to do it, you'll have to accept that I'm going to have to do it somewhere else. But I do want to look at one of the smaller Ruark products as soon as I can make contact with someone capable of supplying one, because they are, according to dealers and people whose opinions I don't disregard out of hand, on a bit of a roll at the moment. Last but by no means least is something a bit more trad, which is new power amplifiers from Cyrus.
Yes, Cyrus Audio is two new stereo power amps, which are both quite similar in many ways. One of which is joining the XR series, called the Power XR, and one joining the Classic lineup, unsurprisingly called the Classic Power. Both offer up to 144 watts into 4 homes. One of the differences is that the Power XR features compatibility with Cyrus's PSU XR external power supply if you need to add a little extra kick to it, whereas the classic power is more in harmony with the PSX R2 power supply. But otherwise, very similar in terms of design and setup. There is a difference in price. Power XR is priced at £2,995, but the classic power is down at £2,395. But it could be interesting to see how the two match up against each other and, of course, the competition.
Yes, well, let's hope we may or may not be looking at these. We haven't done a huge amount of power amplifiers in the past, but if you have a burning desire for me to look at them, do let me know and we'll see what we can get sorted out. Thank you for that, Ian. Right, we have hi-fi reviews. In a bit, I'm going to be talking about the Audiolab 9000N and talking about some of the many comments that it's generated in 24 hours up on the site. But first, we're going to have a brief overview of the Parasound NewClassic 200 integrated amplifier and DAC, which Martin has done, and I'm slightly jealous because unlike any Parasound item I've ever reviewed, it doesn't look like he would have herniated himself getting the bloody things out of the box.
Well, yes, the Parasound 200 integrated is an integrated amplifier. Actually, not too difficult to get out of the box, Ed.
No,
it does have quite a football field-like profile. The top plate is rather extensive. It has quite a substantial depth, I suppose. And a lot of Parasound products, as well, as I'm sure you're aware, are built like tanks, which is
they don't do just enough. It's substantial stuff.
Yeah, but I should note that this integrated amplifier does cost £1,999 in the UK, whereas I believe stateside it's still about $1,200, which does make quite a big price disparity.
Yeah, I mean, even adding in duty and VAT on top of stuff, even adding the VAT and the duty on top of that US dollar price, and of course you've got sales tax in the US, so you've got to add that on as well. But even so, that's still.
But even if you average, like, let's say 10% for, you know, the highest state tax probably in California, there's still a big disparity there across the pond.
Yeah.
But as some of you may know, Parasound was founded by Richard Schramm, who actually left the organization last year. He's somebody I used to know when I lived in San Francisco, very dedicated, very nice chap, and they produce fantastic stuff. But he is now out of the equation, although they are still employing the services of John Curl, the rather expert circuit designer, whose name is often attached to the more reference line of amplifiers, namely the Halo line. They're distributed in the UK by Mike and Phil of Connected Distribution over in Cheltenham. Nothing much changes really in the, I guess, in the Parasound portfolio much at large. I mean, even this amplifier here, I think is 5 years old. I think it's a 2018 design, although I may be wrong on that. But nothing changes much. They add occasionally, in more recent years, they added the Zone Master and Z Custom lines, which are mostly for, as they are described, either zoning applications or custom integrations, so multi-room applications. And again, because these things are built like armadillos, they can easily be strapped to masonry or up in lofts, whatever job they have to do. Manufacturing is done in Taiwan mostly, I think, even for their reference flagship Halo line, but they've been doing this for many years, so that's not a recent thing. And of course, Parasound has been around for, I think, more than 40 years now. I think they were formed in 1982. So the 200 integrated is part of the NewClassic line, which I guess you could call a more conventional hi-fi line. They have a couple amongst this small range of two THX Ultra certified amplifiers, which are obviously sort of targeted at multi-channel and home cinema. The 200 integrated itself has a 1.7-inch 1U rack space height, and much of the Parasound equipment is directed towards rack mounting and therefore sort of semi-industrial applications. 7.25 inches wide, which of course is the standard for rack width. And rather like the Zone Master and Z Custom line equipment, the 200 integrated does have that kind of signature ribbed front, but although made from or forged from a very high quality brushed steel, and sort of very becoming for that fact, although looking also slightly utilitarian at the same time. 2 channels powered by Class D Pascal amps, 110 watts into 4 or 8 ohms. The great thing about the 200 integrated, it has incredible plethora of connections for all eventualities and future-proofing, if you like, and therefore loads of different applications. If you just want to listen to streamed music, unfortunately, there's no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth afforded to you here. But that kind of is also typical of the Parasound thing. They don't go much for licensing new tech, but kind of stick to the tried and tested technologies of yore. But there is something that's inherently solid and reliable in that approach, I think. Some of the key features involve being able to bypass the preamp section. Now, this can be useful if you're using an AVR that may not have the best quality or output for your left and right music listening, and of course to enhance the front soundstage. You can also use the pre-outs to bypass the power amps up to your own amplifiers. And on board is its own high-pass crossover. So you might, for example, want to push a full signal out to, a pair of bookshelf speakers. Also, in terms of bass management, you can set the crossover on the 200 itself as an 80 hertz out, and or you can defer that out to your subwoofer and control the crossover locally there. So there's lots of different options for managing bass. And I have to say, in terms of performance, the seamlessness of the bass management and control in 2 or 3 of those scenarios that I've just mentioned above were beautifully executed. And, I would say Parasound really does have a good hold on this, but, they do have an incredible home cinema, legacy as well at the same time. Lovely dynamics. It's not the most powerful amplifier, but at 110 watts, I guess per channel, you wouldn't necessarily expect that to be the case. Great dynamics, but not what I would call that kind of heft that you might find with reference amplifiers, or certainly not their Halo line. But it's a very, and I'm sure Ed might agree with this from what he knows of Parasound, but this amplifier is very clean sounding, and you don't find it's imposing any stamp on the performance.
Yeah, it's, there's an American house sound, and I think they're one of the less afflicted by this. It's generally speaking, somewhere close to the straight wire with gain ideal. So it's interesting to see that they've managed. Oh, hang on a second. Just give me a moment.
And just to add, really, yes, I've mentioned the great build quality before. Even if you are paying that premium in the UK, don't necessarily wander over to look at the competition without removing this from your inquiry first, because the Parasound build quality really is exceptional. But again, yeah, like we've mentioned, very high price for the UK market. So always consider Parasound. They're not necessarily the manufacturer that comes up that often at the top of people's lists, but definitely consider them. They're a very dedicated, small team of engineers and marketeers, and I've always been a big fan of their stuff.
Perfect. Sorry about that. And another AV Forums review product is in the process of turning up, which is the occupational hazard of doing this during the middle of the day. Right, reviews up on the site, so do check that out. Thank you very much for that, Martin. I'm going to be relatively brief on mine because the review is already up on the site. And my word, some of you have got some strong opinions about it. Audiolab 9000N. It's the flagship Audiolab streamer. It's yours for a brisk £2,499. The big deal about this one is, unlike previous Audiolab streamers which use DTS Play-Fi, which has mixed responses, I have to say I'm not a fan. I've never truly gelled with it. It's not my favorite. They've dispensed with that, and they're using an operating system which has been essentially originally developed by another streaming company called Lumen, and Audiolab is the first people who have licensed it in this form. They're the first people to ever use it wirelessly. Now, I think this is a sensational product. It does something which is tremendously unusual. It's a pig to write about because it imparts almost no character of its own. It is one of the most impressively transparent devices I can remember testing under £5,000. However, the fact that it is £2,500 appears to be a huge stumbling block. I need to just approach this into, obviously, if you don't want to spend £2,500 on a product, you don't. We've reviewed products where you don't have to. I will say that the world doesn't stop at the point where some of these, more affordable offerings cease. There are still increments of performance to be gained. And then on a more subjective level, there's also a user experience to be gained as well. Now, if you ascribe no value to that user experience, that's absolutely fine. But for the same reason that I don't simply survive on Soylent or just use my phone to tell the time, there are elements to how you interact with things around you, which I think, you might need to park with both this and certain other review products. Is it 10 times better than a Wim Pro Plus? No, of course, it can't be 10 times better than Wim Pro Plus, but it does certain things that the Wim cannot do. And if you ascribe no value to some of those functions, that's fine, but a number of other people will. Now, you can effectively take the review on its own merits, and then you can plow through the comments if you are feeling up for a laugh. And I'm glad that it has attracted the comment that it has. We are a forum. I do want your opinions. I just need to make it clear that essentially with certain products, they are going to come across as expensive. They exist in small quantities. They're quite specialist items. And, you're either on board with it or you're not, but we're not going to stop looking at them because a subset of people are not on board with it. If you've got any questions about it, I think I've covered up pretty much everything in the review. It does an awful lot of things extremely well. Perhaps the only slight own goal on the part of Audiolab is that it doesn't have an extensive set of additional digital inputs, because they've put those digital inputs on the matching amplifier. If you aren't buying the matching amplifier, you just get a solitary USB connection, which isn't much use to connect a television to. If you can overlook that, and obviously there are products at the same price which do have more in the way of inputs. We looked at the Cyrus Stream XR, which can't handle the same number of formats, but is more flexible in this regard. You do have choices. You pays your money, you takes your choice. If you are, and we were going back to the conversation about measurements and the ideal, if you are genuinely looking for the cleanest, lowest distortion performance that I can remember testing in a very long time, that has to be something that you should be looking at. As I say, reviews up on the site. Other things coming from me, we've got the Riga Aya loudspeaker. We've got, what else did I do? I did lots of things. And just in terms of things that have turned up, a pair of triangle loudspeakers have literally been heading through the door as I've been saying this. And we've got Arcam's new Radia A25 in and running as well. And that's a very interesting piece of kit. So there's lots to do.
I've also just submitted a review for the Octavio Maestro pair of active speakers.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Good. So there's lots and lots of stuff. And then there's the small matter of editor's choice, which I need to have a discussion with Phil about no later than the end of this week. Yep. So that's all heading up too. Right. Now, very quickly, album and vinyl of the podcast is a combined one, because this is going to divide opinion. It's the new album from DJ Shadow. It's called Action Adventure. Now, if you're thinking, I know how this one sounds, no, you absolutely don't. It's different. At times, it sounds more like Kraftwerk than anything else, but I love it. It made me think. It made me go, I like that, don't like that. I wanted to listen to it more than once. I think it's I like the fact that he's continuing to push and that he's continuing to innovate. It is available on all major streaming services. It is available on vinyl. It's available on CD and cassette if the fancy takes you. So that is my choice there. Then additional to that is a playlist on Qobuz, which is high resolution music from the 1980s. Because why not? I mean, you've all wanted to listen to, various sheeny classics at 192 kilohertz. So that you can, thanks to the wonders of Qobuz compiling just the sort of thing that you need. Those are the items. At some point, I'm going to have to come up with an album of the year for the end of the podcast, and that's not going to be easy either, because there's been some good ones.
You can maybe add a couple of categories to make it easy. Yeah,
we might have to do that. You're right. So that's what's going to happen there. as I say, any feedback, any questions, get them into the YouTube thread or the comment thread on the forums, and I will do my best to get back to you with something approaching an answer. So that is the hi-fi section.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ed. Yeah, great to see the review getting the comments it did, the Audiolab. It's one of those products that definitely makes people ask questions. I mean, obviously, the obvious question is $2.5 grand for a streamer, but that's missing the point. And again, like we said with the TVs, Ed, earlier in the podcast, it's what suits your use case. What is it that you are looking for, and what are the products that fit into that, and what it is that you actually want that product to do? And
yeah, we're going to have to look at this in more depth next year, because I think there are some misconceptions. So we'll set about that with some gusto.
Yeah, but it's an interesting product, and I know you've got another streamer coming in that's going to be incredibly popular as well, around about the same price point. So it'll be interesting to see your thoughts.
Yes. It was left on my doorstep. I'm glad I got it, because I just came back from parents' evening. It was there lurking, £2,000 worth of box just by my front door. But yes, small company called Eversolo. I think the last one we did, it did all right, didn't it? So let's see how we get on with that.
Yeah.
That's on its way as well. So yes.
Okay, well, that wraps everything up for this week's podcast. Again, thanks to the guys for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for watching and listening, or doing both. Don't forget to leave your comments. The best way to do that is on the forum. So head to AV Forums, forum list, go right down the bottom, and you'll find the AV Forums podcast. Go in there, find this episode, add your questions, your feedback, and everything else. And do give us your feedback on what you think about the idea of splitting the podcast off into sections, categories, and going into a little bit more depth, and maybe doing a bit more in terms of explainers or tutorials and all that kind of thing. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to see from us. Is it more interviews? Do you want to see more of the industry coming onto the podcast? And perhaps with us not doing live podcasts next year and being pre-recorded, that might make it easier to get people in the industry. And you sometimes they panic when it's live, because they think, what are you going to ask me? But yeah, give us your feedback. Let us know what you want from the AV Forums podcast. And of course, with the movie side as well, I haven't mentioned movies. Let us know what you want to see with the movies podcast. Are you enjoying the format as it is? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to see us adding in there, maybe perhaps changing? Should we split that one out into different categories? Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think, and we'll let you know how things go by the end of the year. So the next AV Forums podcast is the movies edition. That's coming along on Monday, the 20th of November. That will be live at 8:30. That's our normal kickoff time. We want to join them live. And then this main AV Forums podcast, we're back again in 2 weeks' time on the 27th of November. And again, we're starting at the usual time of 7 p.m. and it will be live. So you can join us for that. And of course, if you've enjoyed the podcast, then you could do all the social media cliched stuff like liking and subscribing and all the rest of it. And of course, you can also buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/AV Forums. If you appreciate what we do here and you want to give us a coffee, that'd be appreciated. Thank you very much for those of you who have done that so far. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.